There comes a point in your life where the darkness doesn't feel like something around you. Anymore it feels like something inside you. Not a storm, but a slow leak, a quiet seepage, a spreading cold that fills the empty spaces first, then the spaces that were never meant to be empty. And that is where the feeling of not enough becomes something more sinister, not just a belief. Not just a wound, but a presence that lives inside you, like an unwelcome tenant. It sits with you in silence. It breathes with you. It waits for the moments when you're too tired to pretend. And then it speaks not loudly, not violently, but in a voice so soft it feels ancient. You were never enough. Not for them, not for yourself, not for this world. And the terrifying part is how familiar that voice sounds, because it speaks in the tones of every person who ever dismissed your pain. It echoes with the disappointment in the eyes of the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally. It feels like the cold hands of memories you tried to bury, memories you swore you'd never think about again. Childhood moments you brushed off at the time, but still bleed inside you decades later. Rooms you walked into where you felt invisible before you even spoke. Cracks in your voice that no one heard. Silent cries in bathrooms, in bedrooms, in the spaces between conversations. Times when you needed comfort, but received confusion, or anger, or distance instead. Every wound, small or catastrophic, becomes a thread, and together they weave a version of yourself you no longer remember agreeing to be, and that version is tired. Exhausted in ways sleep can't fix. Hungry for a validation that never arrives. Starving for a softness that was never offered. You start to notice how the world moves around you, as if you are a ghost, still pretending to be human. You exist on the edges of conversations, the background of rooms, the shadows of other people's lives. And even when you're included, even when you're spoken to, even when someone says they care, you feel like a placeholder, temporary presence. A convenient listener, a silhouette shaped roughly like a person. You start to wonder, if I vanished, would anything actually collapse? Or would the world simply rearrange itself, barely noticing the absence? You don't want to disappear. You just don't want to feel like you barely exist. So you continue moving, continue pretending, continue stitching yourself together with threads made of survival. You become a master of the half-smile. A professional at saying, I'm fine, with the voice of someone who has said it too many times. You keep showing up. You keep giving. You keep carrying weight without ever putting any of it down. And the world praises you for your strength, your resilience, your stability. They applaud the performance without ever realizing it's killing parts of you they never bothered to know. But the darkness knows. It always knows. It knows the nights where your mind becomes a maze you can't escape. It knows the flashbacks you pretend are just bad memories. It knows the tightness in your chest that you hide behind casual laughter. It knows the moments where your hands shake for no reason. It knows the things you never say aloud, because saying them would make them too real. It knows the weight you carry that no one else sees, because they never stayed long enough or quietly enough to notice. And so the darkness becomes your only witness. Not your enemy, not your friend, just the thing that knows too much. You try to outrun it, of course. Everyone does. You bury yourself in tasks, responsibilities, routines, anything that keeps you from thinking too deeply. You surround yourself with noise, because silence is where the truth lives. You stay busy until your body collapses, because rest leaves too much space for the pain to breathe. And still, no matter how far you run, the feeling follows. Not enough, not enough, not enough. Like footsteps behind you that never speed up, never slow down, never stop. It isn't a scream, it's a whisper. But sometimes whispers cut deeper than knives. You start questioning everything you're worth, your abilities, your relationships, your entire existence. You analyze every word you say. You replay every expression on someone's face. You assume anger where there is none, abandonment where there is love, rejection where there is silence. You apologize before anyone accuses you. You shrink before anyone asks you to. You make yourself smaller so no one has a reason to notice your cracks, because deep down, you fear that if anyone looked honestly closely, they would see the truth you've been hiding your entire life. That you are held together by fear and hope in equal measure, and both are wearing thin. Your trauma becomes a second heartbeat. A pulse you feel even when you're smiling. a rhythm of dread that keeps time with your breath. Sometimes it hits you randomly in the middle of a conversation, in the middle of the grocery store, in the middle of a moment that should feel simple. And suddenly your chest tightens, your mind spins, your skin prickles, and you feel like the world is tilting just slightly out of place. Nothing dramatic, nothing visible. Just a shift, a shadow, a reminder that your mind is a battlefield no one else has to walk through. And yet people still ask you why you're so quiet, why you overthink, why you take things too personally, why you worry so much, why you feel so deeply. If only they knew the things you carry that they do not. If only they knew how many versions of yourself you've had to kill just to survive the day. How many times you swallowed words that burned your throat. How many nights you laid awake replaying conversations no one else remembers. How many moments you pretended not to care because caring hurt too much. If only they knew how lonely it feels to be a burden only to yourself. And the cruel part, you're not asking for much. You're not asking to be adored, worshipped, or placed on a pedestal. All you've ever wanted is this: to feel like you matter without having to earn it. To feel like your presence is enough. To feel like your heart is enough. To feel like your existence doesn't require justification. But somewhere along the way, someone taught you the opposite. Someone made you believe your worth was conditional. That you had to be useful to deserve affection. That you had to be perfect to be wanted. That you had to be easy to love to avoid being left behind. And those lessons didn't fade. They settled into your bones. But the deeper you sink into this feeling, the more you begin to realize something unsettling. You cannot remember a time in your life when you ever truly felt enough. Not as a child, not as a teenager, not even on the rare days when someone told you they were proud of you. Every compliment felt like a misunderstanding. Every achievement felt like an accident. Every moment of happiness felt temporary, borrowed, fragile, like something the universe would take away if you held it too tightly. And so you trained yourself not to hold anything too tightly. You learned how to detach before attachment fully formed. You learned how to expect loss before love had a chance to grow. You learned how to keep a polite distance even from people you desperately wanted to trust. Because somewhere deep inside you, a voice kept saying, "Don't get comfortable. You haven't earned comfort." It's a brutal way to live, never fully belonging anywhere, not even in your own life. You become emotionally bilingual. One language for the world, one for your soul. The world gets the polished, well-behaved version of you, the one who listens, who cares, who supports, who keeps everything together. The world gets the version of you that is composed, functional, reliable. But your soul gets the raw truth. The exhaustion, the fear, the memories that don't heal. The doubts that never stop whispering. You become an expert at hiding things. You hide the tremor in your voice by speaking softly. You hide the heaviness in your chest by smiling at the right moments. You hide the ache in your heart by keeping conversations light. You hide the panic in your mind by staying busy, always busy, constantly busy. But hiding doesn't mean healing. And pretending doesn't mean peace. You begin to feel haunted not by ghosts, but by possibilities. Who you could have been if someone had loved you gently. Who you should have been if someone had stayed long enough. Who you would have become if the world hadn't carved doubt into your skin. There is a grief for the version of yourself that never got the chance to exist. And that grief becomes a shadow that follows you everywhere. You feel it behind you when you laugh. You feel it beside you when you walk into a room. You feel it sitting at the edge of your bed at night. It's the grief of almost. The grief of what if. The grief of the person you had to kill to survive the person you became. And it changes you in ways you don't talk about. In ways you barely admit to yourself. You start lowering your expectations, not because you're humble, but because expecting anything higher feels dangerous. You stop asking for reassurance because you don't want to make people think you're needy. You stop expressing your needs because you assume they'll be dismissed. You stop showing your true emotions because you've been punished for them before. You stop hoping for the kind of love that stays, because hope feels like a setup for disappointment. Slowly, quietly, you shrink your life to fit the belief that you are not enough. And the worst part, people praise you for it. They admire your independence. They applaud your composure. They call you strong, calm, mature, peaceful. but they don't see the truth. Your strength was built out of necessity, not desire. You didn't choose resilience. Resilience chose you when abandonment did. And the world has no idea how much you've suffered behind the stillness they find so inspiring. Then there are those nights, where the world is quiet. Where everyone else is asleep, where time feels suspended, and you finally run out of distractions. That's when the darkness becomes bold. It steps out from the shadows, and stands in front of you, like a reflection you can't look away from. It whispers the same old words, but now they feel heavier, more believable, more intimate. Everything would be easier if you were different. Maybe you're the problem. Maybe the world was never meant to hold someone like you. You tell yourself it's just a thought, just a feeling, just a wound speaking. But some nights, the wound speaks with the authority of truth. You lie there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of years pressing down on your chest, and you wonder quietly, secretly, shamefully, why do I always feel like this? Why does the darkness recognize me so easily? Why do I feel like I'm apologizing for existing? You don't tell anyone about these moments. Not because you don't want to, but because you've learned that most people only want the soft parts of your pain, not the parts that shake your voice or tremble in your hands. They want the poetic sadness, not the gritty reality. They want the version of your story that ends with a hopeful message, not the version where you're still breaking. So you keep the darkest parts to yourself, not out of secrecy, but out of self-preservation. You've learned the hard way that honesty can be a risk, that vulnerability can be a weapon in the wrong hands, that people often love the idea of you more than the truth of you. And so the feeling grows. Not enough, not enough, not enough. It embeds itself into your identity. It shapes your relationships. It dictates your choices. It becomes the reason you stay silent when you should speak. The reason you stay when you should walk away. The reason you settle for half love, because full love feels impossible. The reason you tolerate pain because comfort feels unearned. You begin to confuse suffering with loyalty. You begin to confuse exhaustion with responsibility. You begin to confuse numbness with strength. And then one day, without warning, something breaks, not loudly, not dramatically, but softly. Like the quiet snap of a thread pulled too tight for too long. You feel it inside you. A shift, a collapse, a dimming. Not a scream, not a fall. Just an internal exhale that sounds too much like surrender. But it's not surrender. It's fatigue, bone deep, soul deep, fatigue. And at that moment, when the darkness feels too familiar, when the ache feels too old, when the emptiness feels too heavy, you realize something terrifying. You have spent so long trying to be enough for the world, that you forgot what it feels like to be enough for yourself.